All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to start, if we would be so kind. So, thank you very much for your questions. If you would again enter your questions into either the Q&A or into the chat function, and we'll be getting all of them towards the end. For now, we're going to get started and just go through this agenda real quick, which is first, who will benefit from tonight's web class? Why listen to me? And also the other gentleman that'll be joining me tonight. What's the promise? Where's the proof? The ClimateMaster geothermal software system and why that's so important in terms of modeling your system and coming up with your answers. In particular, the first answer is how much it's going to cost, and modeling that is a key thing. If you're ready to implement, how to do it, and then all your questions and answers. So first, who will benefit? And this program really are for families who want to reduce their carbon footprints and save money on heating, cooling, and hot water, and leave a proud legacy for their grandchildren without unnecessary cost or complications. Why listen to me? Great question. So my name's Ron Kamen. I've got 35 years of clean energy experience. I walk the talk. I've got a solar home office. I have heat pumps. I have electric vehicles. I've also been in this field, clean energy, for a number of different years. And in particular, I've worked a lot in the commercial space, saving a host of clients over $350 million a year in energy savings, getting a lot of different incentives to make that happen. You'll recognize some of the names of folks on this list of clients, everyone from government, from large government, municipalities, national and international government organizations, to nonprofits and associated other schools and colleges, etc. And then a whole host of for-profit companies that like to get things done and make sure that they get energy savings as well as the carbon reductions and that things get delivered, which is one of the reasons we're here tonight. Some things that a couple folks say to me, this is the New York State Bridge Authority. This is a quote from their executive director about some of the things that they rely on me to help them do in terms of figuring out their step-by-step program forward to get to zero net energy. They've got solar, they've got electric vehicles. They're now in the process of looking at heat pumps and figuring out how to deal with their buildings. Also, another school that didn't really believe at the time that they could do the things that I said that they could do. And then they found out, lo and behold, yep, we were able to deliver everything and more. And they're very happy with eliminating the carbon that they eliminated, save themselves a ton of money. And just to give you a sense of some of the things we're there. I'm being joined tonight by my co-host, Sean Hogan. So Sean Hogan's been involved in geothermal for a long time. He knows all aspects of the business. He's done everything from working for someone else to owning his own HVAC business. He's been a national trainer for ClimateMaster since 2008. He chairs the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, and he does all the training, oversees the training for everybody across the international spectrum. And then in addition, he likes to say his motto is do it right or stay home. So we'll be talking to Sean along the way. He'll be telling you all the little things that you might want to know about how to do this right and making sure that things get delivered. All right, so what's the promise of tonight? So the promise is that when you get through this program and you install your system, that you wake up on a Saturday morning and while sipping your coffee, you open the Clean Energy app on your device and you see a smile spread across your face as you see you've virtually eliminated the carbon footprint of your home and your energy bills are up to 70% less. 100% of your home's heating, cooling, and hot water is from the power of the earth, from the energy beneath your feet. Your house is healthy and comfortable with no fossil fuels, no carbon monoxide, no explosive hazards, and zero carbon emissions. And your children are happy and proud of you. So where's the proof? Okay, well, first thing is get pumped for heat pumps. Everybody's got a heat pump. This is not new technology. All our refrigerators are a type of heat pump. Compress, expand, and get the heat moved out of a box and dispersed in coils in back of the refrigerator or under the refrigerator. Same thing is true for air conditioners, both in the window and central air conditioners. Those are another source of heat pumps. And the only difference between those types of heat pumps and what's called an air source heat pump is that it's a two-way air conditioner. It cools in the winter the same way your normal air conditioners but during the winter, it turns that process around and therefore brings the heat in from outside and creates heat inside your home or building. So, give you a little sense, the ground source heat pump does the same thing an air source heat pump does, but instead of grabbing that heat from the air, whatever that temperature is, whether it's hot and 100 and trying to then cool it down, or whether it's cold and -5 or whatever degrees, it grabs that constant temperature that's under your feet. During the summer, it provides that cooling temperature with the heat pumps, and during the winter, it reverses the process and grabs that 50 degrees or so heat that's underneath our feet and uses that as the base temperature to then heat pump and beef up the heat and get that into our homes. And the great part about geothermal is that for billions of years, the Earth has been collecting nearly half the energy that hits the planet from the sun. And that energy is absorbed into the ground and it's like a battery. So below our feet, that's why when you go down 4 or 5 feet, there's a constant temperature down there of 50 to 60 degrees. And with geothermal, that's where we start. So if you're cooling, you don't have much to cool. If you're heating, you're now going from 50 or 60 up to your wherever room temperature you want. So that difference makes geothermal the most efficient heating and cooling application in the world. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sean. Sean, if you would, sir.
All right. Well, we're going to show some examples and just talk briefly about some of the applications of geothermal. What you're looking at now is a horizontal trenched application. The soil type makes a great big difference in how much pipe do I need, because that's oftentimes a question that we get. Location, location, location. Next is, and up in the Northeast, this is fairly common, is vertical drilling. You use up a lot less footprint of your property. You can get a lot of sites done that otherwise trench would be probably not a good application. You just don't have enough area to apply that ground loop. Next are pond loops. If you have a body of water that is there year round and it has the appropriate amount of area and depth and or current, it's a great application because you typically get by with a lot less heat exchange surface area, because anytime you create a temperature change around that heat exchanger, the water begins to move. You've completely recharged that battery, both in heating and in cooling. I have done hundreds and hundreds of pond loops. They work exceptionally well. And next is directional or horizontal boring. I think that this is going to be a big, big turning point in geothermal. We're starting to see more application because it can actually go underneath areas that otherwise would be off limits. If you have possibly a drain field or a septic system or a bunch of trees, or you need to get into that backyard but the equipment can't get there, well, you shoot underneath it with these devices. And by the way, they don't do much property damage whatsoever. A couple of picnic table size holes on each end of where the piping is located, and that's it. That's all your earth restoration. So it's a great application.
All right. So, real quickly, let's just talk about some of the incentives that are out there that bring this price down. And one of the biggest ones, 26%, is the United States Federal Tax Credit. So, when you do a geothermal system, and always check with your tax advisor whether you can take this tax credit, but when you do a geothermal system, you can write off 26% of that system, more than a quarter of that system, for your taxes. So when you go to file your taxes, you'll get that credit right on your tax bill. Secondly, in New York State, there's something now called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA. That's the electrification of buildings. And New York State is investing over $450 million in heat pumps incentives. It's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. And then there's over $200 million in other programs to start the market and get things going. And the reason is because this CLCPA makes it mandatory that by 2050, we're going to get led to an 85% reduction in emissions. And when you take a look at greenhouse gas emissions, people normally think of electricity, and that's definitely a place that needs to be addressed. And we're moving there with solar and wind, as well as the existing hydropower in state. But ultimately, you have to get to buildings. Buildings can be as much as 30 to 40% of the greenhouse gases or more that we emit. And then the other piece is transportation. But tonight we're talking about specifically buildings and how to reduce your carbon emissions and simultaneously save money by taking advantage of both the federal tax credit and then New York State incentives. And the New York State incentives are in something called the New York State Clean Heat Program. And this is an effort between all the utilities and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority that's designed to give everybody in the state the opportunity to do these types of programs, to implement these technologies, and to save money doing it. And these incentives are very lucrative and intense. For those people who are now coming in Central Hudson territory, there's a podcast about this specifically. And if you want to listen to the Central Hudson representative, Mark Sclafani from Central Hudson, there's a podcast specifically where Mark talks about these programs. You can go onto the Central Hudson website right here and find that the average incentive for a Hudson Valley home is $10,000. That's for a small average size Hudson Valley home. Those incentives can go up dramatically if you have a larger home or if you have a larger home and need a bigger heating and cooling system. But these incentives, again, on the average, another $10,000 off the cost, and that comes right off the top of what the geothermal system costs you. Just to give you a sense, this is not just for individual residents, although it works extremely well for individual residents, but for multifamily buildings, what developers are finding now is that geothermal under the footprint of those buildings can supply all the heat, all the cooling, all the hot water up to 25 or 30 stories tall. And if you want to know more about that commercial aspect, happy to talk to you about that offline. But in addition, this is a affordable housing complex downstate where it's now being replicated all throughout the state. And in this housing complex, the heating cost is 10% less than natural gas. The air conditioning cost is $10 a month versus $100 a month or more for similar types of apartments in New York. And part of what makes this happen is solar combined with geothermal. So when you can do solar electric simultaneously, you get some additional benefits, additional tax credits, additional incentives, and be able to use the power of the sun to both provide your electricity as well as your heat and hot water and cooling. And this technology works, as you'll hear, basically everywhere, whether you have a large home, a small home, you've got a field to put this in, a pond, you just have a small plot of land with the directional drilling and being able to do wells. This technology works for any type of home, as long as you can then integrate it into your heating system. And that's one of the things that Sean is going to talk about in a little while. So when you take a look at this and you look at the options, before, electric energy bills, heating bills going up shockingly, rising energy rates, you're looking at a ton of carbon per year on the average household. That's what our heating systems emit. You have basically no control over the cost and everything else. You're just subject to the whims of the energy industry. A lot of kids are getting concerned now with everything that's going on with the environment. So afterwards, what this technology does is it allows you to shock-proof your bills. You now put in place a system that gives you a 70%, up to a 70% reduction in your heating, hot water, and cooling costs. You have zero carbon from the work that you're doing. You're doing your part to help the environment and make things better, and you have proud kids, and you're leaving a legacy as well for your grandchildren. And all that without having to figure it all out by yourself, by just relying on salespeople for information. You have the utility, you have NYSERDA, you have a bunch of folks like me helping to make sure that things get done right without being unsure about what you're doing, getting lost in the technicalities, being overwhelmed by the complexity, not realizing how to save money with the incentives and the financing that are there, or leaving money on the table, or choosing the wrong technology. Instead, the simplest part, you just choose your path to geothermal, save money, and help save the planet. The ClimateMaster geothermal software system. So this is back to Sean, if you would, Sean.
All right. So ClimateMaster has a software package that we provide for our installing network. It's called GeoDesigner. But I also want to cover, pardon me, some of the attributes to the product we're going to be talking about today, which is what we call our Trilogy or QE45. Has the lowest operating costs, has a very advanced hot water tank that communicates back and forth between the heat pump. No one else owns that kind of technology. ClimateMaster has a history of charitable contributions. We have 60 years of manufacturing prowess in our industry, leading in many, many categories. Satisfaction guarantee, and let's face it, we've been in the green technologies for a very, very long time. So about Trilogy. Trilogy does a number of things. It heats, it cools, it heats the hot water. And we talk about hot water, it's full-on hot water. It's not just while it's in the process or of heating or cooling as a byproduct. It's full-on 100% hot water production. Because it's variable speed technology, it load matches what's going on outside, both in heating or cooling. Good things comes in threes. Variable speed airflow. It's very quiet and very comfortable. Variable speed compressor technology, along with the internal pumping that drives our fluid either to and from the heat pump through the tank for the hot water or the loop field. Has the highest efficiency EPA certified at 45 EER and high COPs. And I will hasten to tell you that I've lived with the Trilogy in my house now for coming up on 7 years. I couldn't be happier than with the comfort, the lack of noise. Whoever complains about lack of noise, right? I've not actually had to do anything but just keep my filter clean in 7 years. It's just been a flawlessly running machine. And one of the unique features about Trilogy that ClimateMaster owns the patent on is that if you have a need for hot water in your tank, in other words, it's below the set point, what it will do is it will actually, in the cooling mode, it'll shut off your ground loop pump, and rather than pouring that heat out of your house and into the ground loop, we'll put it in your hot water tank. So that is either free hot water or free cooling, your choice. No one else has that technology, and we have the patent on it. The Trilogy QE operates like a highway driving. It's steady operation, consistent comfort, and low wear and tear on components. I will tell you that my heat pump rarely shuts off. I'm not in a cooling dominant climate. I live out near the Seattle area. I'm north and east of Seattle. And let's face it, we're known for rain. We're not known for cooling. So I'm blissfully unaware that my heat pump runs a great deal, but I love my electric bills. I'm all electric. I'm 1,900 square feet plus 1,000 square foot shop. I typically run at 10 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm running about $55 all electric bill for my entire property per month in the summer. It's just nothing. Traditional HVAC systems start and stop. My old heat pump, when it got to the set point, it would shut off. And when it turned back on, I got the full capacity of that heat pump. That was fine, but it wasn't ideal. The Trilogy heat pump will ramp the compressor and fan speed up and down to match the condition that's going on outside. It's very, very unique in that way. Here's a couple of application examples. The unit is a package unit. It's upflow, downflow, or horizontal. It shows on the left-hand side a closet installation, and then with the tank sitting right next to it in a typical garage application. My tank happens to be about 20 feet away from my heat pump, and it works phenomenally well. It's just a great, great system. Here's a little view of the tank. It is an iGate Smart Tank. It's a highly customized tank. By the way, this is an all plastic tank. There's nothing to rust or degrade. Tremendous amount of foam. It's about 3.5 inches of dense foam in every direction, top, bottom, and all the sides. It's physically a large tank, but it doesn't weigh very much because, again, it's plastic and foam. I will tell you that this thing is an amazing thermos bottle. Here a few weeks ago, I lost power out where I live for 4 days. I also lose water because, well, I'm on a well. When my power came back on and I was able to view my control system, my tank had lost about a total of 7 degrees in 4 days. This thing is an amazing thermos bottle. So if the size, design, and installed correctly, this thing will meet all your hot water needs for sure. Our controls platform is extremely unique for not only the homeowner, but also for the installing contractor. We have phone applications, we have computer and tablet applications that can communicate via the customized thermostat that ClimateMaster has brought out that only operates a Trilogy. No other thermostat will operate that. The thermostat actually is the Wi-Fi gateway so that the contractor, if there's an issue, can look into the homeowner system. And I got to tell you, as a technician, the ability, if there's an issue, to look at the system and show up more prepared to deal with it is huge. And technicians really embrace this type of technology. Here again are some of the applications. Again, we can typically fit a loop field into your application based on what you have there, whether it's vertical, horizontal, or as I touched on earlier, also some directional boring. We can usually find a way to get it done. It's rare that we can't. So GeoDesigner software, we're going to analyze, then plan, and then execute. So to analyze, we're going to actually open up that software. Here's an example of a house that we're going to take a look at. It always starts with a load calculation. Anybody that doesn't do a proper load calculation on the house is not somebody I would recommend you want to work with. So in the GeoDesigner software, it starts with that manual J load calculation. We're going to select the most representative city for that state. We're going to then put in the load calculation numbers. You'll see in here that we have a much higher heating load profile than we do cooling. One of the unique benefits of the QE45 or the Trilogy heat pump is it is made for this type of application because we can set the capacities. In other words, I need a higher capacity in heating. I don't need so much in cooling. And in typical HVAC, if you apply too large of an air conditioner, it can lead to a bit of discomfort because it doesn't run long enough to typically start to drop the moisture latent out of that air. You can start to feel a little clammy. We can address that, and we do exceptionally well with the Trilogy heat pump. One of the things that the dealer will have the ability to do is come in here and create what we call a rate file. You can put in a summertime and wintertime rate, not only of electric, but also your fossil fuels, your natural gas, your propane, and your fuel oil. And it can save that because we can test drive several different kinds of heating and cooling systems that you may want to consider for your home. Because how do we make a decision? It comes down to numbers and what we think we're going to save over the life of that heat pump or that appliance. So in here you can see that we've applied our load, and we're choosing now, we're going to compare a 1860, that's an 18 to 60,000 BTU Trilogy heat pump. It's going to be on a vertical bore field. We're going to compare it to a oil furnace with a 14 SEER air conditioner. Also on the very bottom, we're going to compare it to a 20 SEER variable speed air-to-air heat pump. So we're kind of given a broad brush perspective here of how will this line up against some of the other choices that I as a homeowner have. So you'll see up here on the left-hand side, we have gone ahead and we have limited that capacity in the cooling mode. We went to 42,000 just to give ourselves a little bit of buffer. So we're going to operate that heat pump from 18,000 to 42,000. That way we're going to be able to take that humidity out of the air and bring more comfort into the home. And I will tell you, this thing drops that humidity like nobody's business. We've again taken it up to the 60,000 BTUs because we had a 56,000 BTU heat loss in the heating mode. We also want to pay attention as to the design of the loop field. And you can see here, one of the things that we do is we talk about where's the average depth. And if you look at the graphic, the average depth was halfway down that borehole. So in this case, when we say that average is 150 feet, in this example, that's a 300-foot borehole. We're telling the software, hey, we don't want to have a loop field entering the heat pump below 30 or higher than 90 degrees. And we've selected auto size, so it will tell us how many feet of borehole with average rock as a soil condition will we need. We also have told the software we're going to use the iGate Smart Tank because that's what marriages up to the Trilogy heat pump. So when you hit enter and let it run, the program, again, all the conditions we put into the software is on the left-hand side, but on the right, what does it tell me? Well, I got to have 660 feet of total bore field. It shows that I'm going to have down to about 30-degree entering water, and my maximum in cooling is going to be 84. So I'm well within those parameters. Let's see here. Up in the heating mode, for the Trilogy heat pump, I'm getting an average of 4.23 COP, which means $4.23 worth of heat for a dollar's worth of electricity. Folks, that's a pretty good return on investment. $1,200 annually estimated for the heat pump. And you'll notice here it's showing no auxiliary heat because the heat pump's able to carry that load. In the cooling mode, again, higher than the rated 45 EER. It's not a SEER like air conditioners because it's not seasonal. The ground loop does not make it seasonal. $78 annual for cooling. How about that hot water? We're getting a $4.66 return on that dollar's worth of electricity. 100% of the hot water is created by that heat pump. There is no auxiliary. For an annual of $221 for 4 people, we told that it had 4 people in this house in this example. So for heating, cooling, and hot water with the Trilogy heat pump, we're going to be about $1,500 a year. I don't know about you. I'd probably embrace that pretty well. But how does it compare? So we, again, chose an 80% oil furnace. We put on it a 3-ton 14 SEER air conditioner. And apparently we put an oil hot water tank in there. Again, we put in the fuel costs, both summer and winter, because we're heating hot water in the summer as well. And you'll see in here that it's more than double. It's total annual heating, cooling, and hot water of about $3,900. That's significant. In the GeoDesigner software, the dealer has the ability to create reports. And I find these incredibly valuable because it shows it's personalized for that location. It shows in here what the load calculations were, what the thermostat set points were, how many BTUs, the weather city, what the design temperatures were for that weather city, which, by the way, is usually averaged over at least 20 years, oftentimes using a nearby military base or airport. And on the right, you're going to see that we show the comparative costs broken down in heating, cooling, hot water, and then annualized. I will make this statement because I've been doing this a very, very long time. This is my 40th year in geothermal. I have geothermal heat pumps out there I've installed over 30 years ago, and they're chugging along just fine. And I will tell you, you're not going to be making those statements about any other HVAC piece of equipment, especially the ones that sit outside. One of the direct benefits of geothermal is that you're using the earth constant temperature. You're using pipe that probably has a 100-year lifespan or greater because there's no UV, and the equipment sits inside the residence. It's not subject to the weather conditions outside. I often tell people, you know when the most efficient time is for an air source heat pump or air conditioner that sits outside? And that answer is the day you install it, because after that, as it starts to load up with dirt, leaves, it loses some of its efficiency year after year after year. Even cleaning it, you get better, but you still lose some of that. So here you can see. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, back to me. Sorry about that. All right, folks. So just to cut it down and make it just a little more, a little bigger chart. So when you take a look, and this is something that gets customized for your home, and that's one of the things that we really like about this particular system, is that you put in all the data. You start with wherever you're at, you match that to your bill. So what this system does is it lets you match your bills, see what your energy costs are. In this particular example, we were looking at a monthly cost of an oil furnace with a high efficiency air conditioning system of $350 a month. Compare that to one of the highest air source heat pumps, which, as Sean mentioned, has some issues with being outside and its ability to maintain and come on and off and long lasting, etc., dealing with the weather. And that's $260. So you would save some money. But then when you take a look at this triple geothermal Trilogy system with less than $125, or nearly a third of the price. And you take a look at that cost over a year, $1,500 versus $3,000 versus $4,200 with an existing system. Take a look at over 5 years, look at over 10 years, look at over 20 years. Whatever your time frame is, what you're going to see is that the cost of putting in one of these systems, very efficient, high return on your investment, excellent investment all the way down the lines. All right, so let's say you're ready to implement. So what do you need to know? So first, get a free assessment, right? Let somebody come and take a look and analyze your home, put the data into the software, match your current existing energy costs, and then compare that with a geothermal system. And one of the nice things that you'll get is this $500 discount by being part of this webinar series tonight. So if you would sign up for that discount, and if you do decide to go forward, you get an additional $500 discount in addition to the 26% federal tax credit. Check with your tax advisor, and the $10,000 or more Central Hudson utility incentive that comes right off the top. And that's part of what the installer will tell you and show you, is exactly how much it will cost, how much the utility will incentivize you to do it, how much the federal tax credit will be, deduct your $500, and that'll be it. And you'll also get to know then what your financing options are, so that if you don't want to put up the capital up front, you can do it over time and just basically be net cash flow positive. So we're going to put this into the chat function in a bit, but if you want, that's if you write down that URL, geothermal.climatemaster.com/free assessment, and that'll get you to where you can get an analysis of your particular home so that it's customized specifically for you. And the third step is just get ready to have a clean energy future. So with that, we're going to open it up to Giovanni from Bell Heating and Cooling, who's the ClimateMaster regional representative, who's just going to walk you through a little bit. Giovanni, if you would, what happens when somebody does sign up for a free assessment, what you guys do, how quick you respond, what's the process that takes them from here to there, and then we're going to get into everybody's questions. So Giovanni, if you would.
Sure. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you for having me here. So basically, it's a pretty, simple process. The question that most homeowners have is this the right thing for me? And that's where we come in, right? It's a very simple yet very important question, right? So they contact us here, and basically what we do is we set up a visit with one of our experts here. I think even Brian or Keith, beyond being very knowledgeable with anything HVAC related, and especially geothermal related. I mean, we've been working with the geothermal technology for nearly 2 decades now. We're kind of nerdy, so when the technology first came out, we jumped all over it. Anyway, so there, beyond being very knowledgeable with geothermal and HVAC, they're also professional licensed engineers. So we can actually come to your home and do the home assessment, not just as an HVAC individual, but also from an engineering perspective. We will, like Sean also mentioned, do the home assessment. We'll take a look at the property. We'll take a look at the square footage. We'll take a look at cubic feet, determine what the right BTU output is for the house to properly heat the home, determine the size of the equipment, the tonnage, and and then we will put together a design, which we will then email to the homeowner for review. And of course, we will be there walking, the homeowner through the whole process, answering any questions, educating them and the technology. Doing the load calculation is very important, as Sean mentioned it earlier. So it's a very, it's not as scary as it may seem. It's actually a very simple process. We'll pretty much do all the legwork, obviously. Once the homeowner, with our guidance as to which system would best be for them, for their home, we will also help with all the incentives. We will handle all the paperwork and legwork for the rebates with the utility companies. There are many ways to finance this type of project as well. Whether it's a private avenue, we have financing options here through the company as well. Some utility companies also offer financing as well, and we will help with every single step along the way.
Great, thanks, Giovanni. Really appreciate it. All right, folks. So we're going to get into this now. Question and answer period. So I'm going to stop the share for the moment. And let's see, hold on one second. I'm just going to pull up the questions. If you would, put your questions, please, into either the chat or into the Q&A section. And in the chat, by the way, I'm going to put that URL so that you can just click on the URL. If you want to get that free assessment, just click on the URL. It's in the chat function, and it'll take you right to the web page to download that certificate and sign up. So first question here is, how much cost is it out of pocket? Sean, you want to take that one?
Well, being that I'm from the Seattle area, I would defer that over to Giovanni because he's the local installer. So,
yes. So go ahead, Giovanni.
Nicely done, Sean. I like it. All righty. Well, great question. It's not so simple to answer, simply because it varies, right? From not every house is the same, and not every house has the same BTU needs to properly heat the house, right? It all depends on the square footage, the cubic feet, and there's just so many different variables, right? Is there ductwork? Do we need to add ductwork? Do we need to, it's not a simple black and white answer. It really, really does depend. What I can tell you, though, is that because of the incentives that are being offered right now, if this is something that you've considered doing for your home, going with the heat pump technology, right now really truly is a time to do it. Between the federal tax credit of 26%, like you mentioned earlier, Ron, and the NYSERDA or utility rebates, I mean, you're looking at an easy, 50+% of the project is being covered by all these incentives, and which reduces the cost quite drastically for out of pocket, really.
Right. So again, folks, so one of the things you want to do is really have it customized for your home. So if you've done energy efficiency and you've got a lot of insulation in your attic, you've insulated your walls, you have really tight windows, your home is well insulated, then it's going to be one thing. If your home is a little less insulated and you've got a bigger home, obviously it's going to be something else. If you have existing ductwork, that's in a plus benefit because now you don't have to pay for vents to be able to move the heat around. One of the other questions that came up, guys, is can you do zoning with the Trilogy system? So can you zone off your house into different rooms and different sections?
Giovanni, go ahead and jump in here at any point, but I can address that quite easily. ClimateMaster developed a phenomenal zone system. You don't need, mechanically, you don't need some other equipment that normal HVAC requires. So as long as the ductwork is accessible for allowing to zone, it's a great way to approach this kind of a system. Simply put, yes, it can. And we've all been in houses where by the time the top floor gets properly cooled, you can hang beef downstairs. And, zoning helps alleviate an awful lot of that. We've been in those homes. So the short answer is yes, it certainly can.
Great. There's someone who's got a question. They say that someone said that they can get everything that they need, all sized and everything else, just by looking at their home on the internet. Could you guys speak to that particular approach versus this much more customized approach that you guys take?
I'm going to, Giovanni, go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Look, because of, we're going through some, obviously, not so, out of the norm, if you will, because of the current COVID situation. We had to make some changes. And last year, in the beginning, we were doing a lot of home assessments through Zoom, right? We could gather a lot of the information online, but not all the information, simply because we have to really take a look at the layout, the configuration, the setup of the home, cubic feet, how tall are the ceilings, so on and so forth. So yes, short answer, we could gather a lot of the information digitally or over through the computer, but it'd be best to be present physically.
Okay. Someone's been doing their research. They looked at the website and they want to know, is a variable speed system better than a two-stage system?
Hands down, by far, absolutely no contest. How's that for an answer? I live with a single speed geothermal heat pump for 21 years, and ClimateMaster offered to, field trial the Trilogy. So I took out a perfectly good operating heat pump after 21 years and, dismantled it and recycled it. And I put this in here, and I got to tell you, I was comfortable. I wasn't unhappy with my electric bill because, again, I'm all electric. But when I put in the Trilogy variable speed, I didn't really understand what comfort truly felt like until I had that in here. The temperatures just were so even. The fan runs a lot, but it's at a very, very low capacity. It's just kind of idling. It just ramps up as it needs to for those conditions. So, yeah, it's a big, big difference. Also, I was able to kind of play around a little bit and fine tune as I needed for the comfort in various parts of my home by going over to my thermostat and adjusting my airflow. That's how easy it is. So leagues ahead of that. And certainly the comfort warrants it, I will tell you.
Great. We got a bunch of questions. Keep them coming, folks, and we'll get to yours as soon as we get through the queue. So another question that came up is, of the 4 different layouts that you showed us, Sean, which one is the most efficient loop layout?
Well, the answer to that question, which I get a lot, especially out here in the land of Microsoft and Boeing engineers, the one that can be installed on your project to support your load and your heat pump for the least first cost. That's the most efficient loop. That's the best choice by far. I like to have a little fun with it because when I get these questions, I will look at the homeowner and say, well, is there a lake or a pond nearby that I'm not aware of? No. Well, then let's scratch that off the list. So, it's that truly holds to that statement. Whichever one can be applied for the least first cost, but yet provide the support for that heat pump supporting that load of that home. That's the answer.
All right. Someone has a well that they use for house water. Can they use that well for geothermal as well?
The short answer is maybe. First and foremost, there's a few ingredients on open loop, as we call that, applications. Number one, is it allowed jurisdictionally at that location? And sometimes that's a state or a city or a county question. If the answer is yes, then there's 3 legs to the stool, as I call it, that have to be satisfied. Number one, water quality. Number 2, quantity. And number 3, where is an acceptable and allowable place to discharge the water once it leaves the heat pump? The water goes through the heat pump one time. We're going to add a little bit of heat to it in the cooling mode. We're going to take a little bit of heat out of it in the heating mode. We can't send it back down the same well because in the wintertime, there's a chance you could freeze up the well under a real cold snap. So you have to discharge the water. Again, that can sometimes be a question for the authority for that location. But I want to emphasize, yes, you can, but you have to satisfy all 3 legs of that stool, not 2 out of 3, all 3. Then you have a good application.
All right. Somebody has a geothermal system existing. Can they still get the rebate? And can they still take the tax credits? So first, I want to say, always check with your tax advisor because everybody's situation is unique. Always checks with your tax advisor. The federal 26% federal tax credit is across the board, but depending upon how your situation is, you may or may not be able to take it. Most people can. If you're paying taxes, most people can, but always check with your tax advisor. Anybody know the answer? If somebody has an existing system, can they still get the incentives and get a tax credit if they are replacing their existing geothermal system?
Well, Ron, like you said, you definitely have to check with your accountant on that. I can tell you right now that if you have an existing geothermal system that needs to be updated or replaced with a newer system, then I can tell you definitely yes, you can with the, if we're replacing it with newer equipment. As far as getting the incentive simply because you have the geothermal, I couldn't tell you that. You would have to ask an accountant.
Okay. All right. So here's somebody that's got a home on the top of a mountain and it's really cold. It gets down to minus 20 sometimes for a few weeks. They've got 900 square foot on one level, 1,750 on their main level, and then another 1,750 square foot basement that they're heating. Currently have a boiler, an oil boiler. We're running hot water to 2 air handlers. They got an 18-foot ceiling that drops to a 9-foot ceiling and a slope. What will it cost them? How soon can you start the job? And the first piece is, what will it cost you? Get a free assessment. Get these guys to come out. Let them look at your particular situation. Let them run the numbers about where you're at now and tell you specifically for your location, the type of drilling they have to do, the opportunity. You have a pond, don't have a pond, horizontal field, vertical field, drilling, cost, type of rock, etc., how much integration with your existing system. Get a free assessment. That'll give you the number that you're looking for, and then you can talk to your accountant about the tax credits, and they'll also, obviously, Bell will run you the incentives and how much you'll get out of Central Hudson. And in your case, it sounds like you'll get more than the average $10,000, so that comes right off the top. There'll also be financing packages available for you. So there you go. There's the answer to that question. Anybody want to add anything to that one? Oh, how soon can you start? When are they going to get back? If they fill out one of these assessments, Giovanni, when's someone going to get a hold of them and when can you get things done?
Well, we can be there fairly quickly. As soon, from the second that the assessment is requested, we can be there, within that same week. Obviously, we will have to, once we get the green light to go ahead with the project, we will then start the permitting process. Depending on how long that takes, it could take anywhere between, a week to 3 weeks, 4 weeks because of the current situation. As soon as we get the permitting, then we can go ahead and get started with the drilling. So it's fairly fast.
So from start to finish, what's really the timeline you think?
When you say start, you mean from the moment of the assessment?
Yeah, so I mean, so obviously depending upon the permit, but I mean, just give somebody an average sort of range of what the timeline looks like.
Um, you're looking at, including permitting and drilling and whatnot, you're looking at approximately maybe about 6 weeks or so.
And obviously that'll vary, and part of it is
Yeah, it
your
varies,
town,
of
and
course.
some towns are easier to get permits out of,
That's
others
right.
are more of a pain. That's really becomes, from my experience, the sticking point is usually the permit piece. The construction goes really quickly, the assessment gets done, the homeowner gets their decision, and then it's the government permitting that sometimes puts the monkey wrench into the whole timeline. But get started sooner than later, and sign up for your assessment now and get that started. All right. So another question here is cold spots. So they have cold spots in their house now. Will the geothermal system be able to take care of those cold and hot spots and be able to even out, or how does that all work?
One of the most powerful things, it took me a lot of years to recognize and become disciplined enough to ask, was questions like this with the homeowner, because you always sit down at some point with the homeowner to kind of review everything. I ask questions like that. Are there areas of discomfort now? And then I'll take a little harder look at the duct delivery system and the loading of that particular area. Maybe it's an area with vaulted ceilings and we need more return, or we need to stir the air more in that room. There's reasons for it. They can oftentimes be addressed, but the best thing to do is be made aware of it so that you as an installation company can in fact address those concerns. So the questions that you didn't ask sometimes are regretted later because you didn't know it was an issue, so now it becomes a little more challenging to address post installation. So oftentimes, absolutely, it can be. Yeah. If I saw an area that I had concerns about, I would actually, rather than doing what's called a block load, in other words, what's the whole house load calculation, I'll do a room by room load calculation. And then I'll take a look at how much ductwork is going into that room, and will that have the capability of delivering that level of comfort for the load of that room. And it doesn't matter if it's a cooling load or a heating load. Can I deliver the goods to overcome that?
Great. Okay. Another question. I guess this is I've heard that the drilling makes a big mess of my yard. How is it cleaned up?
Well, I can't speak for drillers in New York necessarily, but I frequently I tell the homeowner, it's I try and address what is going to be done before we walk away and hand you the keys, but it's not likely going to be a golf course. Drilling is a bit of a messy process. Drillers sometimes they don't clean up after themselves as much as you'd like, but I find that setting that expectation is truly important. And I find that a lot of homeowners, they really don't want the heating and cooling company responsible for the landscape because, will it be satisfactory to them ultimately? So I found it was more advantageous to have that discussion and set that expectation so we all were on the same sheet of music at the end of the project. That's what worked well for me.
Yes, and he is absolutely correct. It's not going to be, you're not going to have a golf course like long after the project is done. It is a messy, process. However, we will leave it leveled. The driller will leave it leveled. No, dents or rocks or anything protruding or anything like that. It will be ready for seating, basically.
Yeah, so basically, if you have the right installer, and that's you want to make sure that you talk about this up front. What should happen is after the well gets drilled, they level out the ground, they make it back to smooth and level that way that it was originally. And then, you know, you're planting grass, right? So basically
That's
one
it.
season of grass or whatever landscaping you're doing, then you're back to where it is. And
Yeah,
we
that's
got
right.
lots of pictures of beautiful homes that, you know, definitely had their lawn dug up when they were doing the drilling. But, you know, 3-4 months later, when the grass was grown, everything was back to normal and everything was beautiful. So, and then
Right.
nobody knows that you're actually using the power of the earth to heat and cool your home, and that you're saving up to 70% on your energy bills. Folks, if you have any last questions, this is it. We're winding down. We've taken our hour here. Anybody got any last questions? Please throw them into the chat or the Q&A right now. And seeing that we have none and that we're at 8 o'clock, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank our panelists, especially Sean Hogan and Giovanni from Bell Heating and Cooling. Once again, folks, the free assessment, the chat is in there. How do I get an estimate on Long Island? Just fill out that free assessment. We'll also get taken care of you on Long Island. A little different utility setup down there, same tax credit, but different incentive structure. But if you fill out that free assessment, we'll make sure that it gets to the right person on Long Island to get a hold of you as well. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, ClimateMaster, for putting this all together. And folks, have a great night. Take care all. Be well.